In the luxurious house next to the isolated area, everything remained peaceful on the surface, but inside, there was a turmoil due to the new calculations that Ted was cleverly setting up. When he suddenly suggested that Leslie abandon the idea of moving to the house across from Dupree's and instead move into the house under his name, the seemingly absurd scenario was covered by an irresistible sincerity. Ted even promised to transfer all the ownership papers to Leslie, creating the impression that he only wanted to protect her from the legal troubles of the impending divorce. With a logical presentation, Ted made Leslie believe that he was giving her a safe choice, a chance to stand firm in the storm and escape the heavy shadow of Nicole. Leslie's decision was quickly made, and she not only agreed but also directly ordered Nicole to pack up and leave, as a step to assert her new control. But a long-running drama rarely stops at simple things. When the light of kindness fades, the dark patches begin to appear. Viewers are drawn to wonder whether Ted is truly a generous benefactor or just taking advantage of the opportunity to tighten his grip on Leslie. Under the guise of a generous hero, he may be hiding a dangerous secret related to Leslie's past, and the giving away of the house is actually a power play, a subtle method of control that those involved do not realize. His patience, his insistence that this is for the good of all, further reinforces the feeling that Ted has a long-term plan in place, where Leslie is just a pawn that needs to be placed in the right place. Why this dramatic move? Ted also puts invisible pressure on Nicole. In the eyes of the public, he puts on the face of a self-sacrificing person, willing to put the family's interests first, turning Nicole into an antagonist, a selfish and dissatisfied person. All eyes around turn to Nicole with suspicion, and this is Ted's temporary victory. But this kind of victory rarely lasts because the cracks in the truth will gradually become clear, and the heroic image that Ted is trying to build is in danger of collapsing at any moment. In Monday's episode, Eva became the factor that changed the balance. For the first time, she witnessed a different side of her father, a side that could not be erased. When she witnessed Ted talking to Leslie in a tone that was both fake and calculating, the image of the exemplary father in Eva's mind began to crumble. She no longer saw a man who devotedly sacrificed for his family, but a cunning man who was willing to take everything away from another woman to satisfy his ambition and preserve his own honor. That truth not only disappointed Eva but also left a deep psychological scar, because the feeling of betrayal from the person she loved the most always carried a terrible weight. For Eva, Leslie used to be a powerful role model, a strong woman that she admired from afar. When she saw Leslie pushed out of that position, deprived and turned into a pawn in Ted's game, Eva could no longer remain silent. She was faced with a difficult choice: continue to protect her father who was gradually revealing his dark side, or resolutely leave to stand by Nicole, her mother who was suffering a lot of pain. This moment opened a new direction for Eva's character, an inevitable turn in her journey to adulthood. That event also left a shockwave for the entire community around the Duprees. An action that seemed to be just a private family matter suddenly became the center of discussion, where each character had their own perspective and interests. Whispers, scrutiny, and secret alliances begin to form, because in this world, power never stands still. Ted may think he has the whole game, but Eva, Nicole, and Leslie, each with their own traumas and motivations, may become the link that completely upsets his plans in the gloomy atmosphere of the mansion. Where the walls seem to retain every word and look, Ted's latest move created an irreversible shock. He put on the mask of a caring man, a loving husband and a devoted father, then brazenly snatched everything away from Leslie to create a story of sacrifice. In the eyes of the public, he skillfully transformed himself into a man who put the interests of his family first, forcing Nicole and other outsiders to believe that he deserved to be trusted again. However, all those excuses could not cover up the naked truth that Eva had just witnessed. In Monday's episode, that moment became the line of no return between the image of the father she once admired and the real person exposed before her eyes. Eva stood still, her eyes following the way Ted spoke to Leslie. The words were gentle, the tone was so sincere that it was hard for outsiders to doubt. But to Eva, who had lived in that house and heard every word, all that remained was cold lies. She saw clearly the calculation in Ted's eyes, saw how he used Leslie as a pawn to please Nicole, using the guise of kindness to carry out his own schemes. In an instant, the image of her exemplary father shattered into pieces, because that hypocrisy not only betrayed Leslie but also betrayed Eva's own immature trust. And once the crack appeared, it would be there forever, never to be mended as before. Eva's reaction was not only disappointment but also a turning point for this character. She used to see Leslie as a powerful role model, a strong woman who dared to face the storm, and now she had to witness that woman being stripped of everything at the hands of her father. That injustice made Eva agonize, forcing her to choose. Continue to turn a blind eye, standing by Ted just because he was her biological father, or resolutely leave and seek support from Nicole, who, although weak, at least did not hide herself behind a flashy shell. That struggle opened up a new series of tragedies. When Eva realized that family love is sometimes a prison that makes people unable to breathe. As for Leslie, the pain she had to endure did not only come from being deprived, but also from the humiliation of realizing that she was just a target for Ted to exploit. At first, she believed that Ted giving her the house and ownership was an act of protection, a way to escape the legal battle with Nicole. But when the pieces gradually became clear, Leslie understood that it was all just a drama set up for Ted to regain the sympathy of his ex-wife and public opinion. The feeling of being betrayed and exploited made her fall into a state of anger, because in her eyes, the freedom and power she had always held had been turned into props in the calculating game of a man who seemed close to her. Leslie reacted like a fire that had been suppressed for too long, flared up strongly and was not easily extinguished. She was not only angry because she lost her house or honor, but because she was degraded into a tool in a petty scheme. That humiliation urged Leslie to find a way to regain her position, not only to fight against Ted, but also to prove to Eva that the model of power had not disappeared. Deep down, Leslie understood that this battle was not just a confrontation about property or interests, but a battle to regain trust and respect, both from Eva and from herself. The undercurrent in the family had now turned into a storm, and each character was caught in a spiral with no way out. Ted may think he won by forcing Leslie out of the game and putting pressure on Nicole, but all he did was expose himself to scrutiny. Eva is no longer the obedient daughter who looks up to her father with admiration, but a living witness to the lies that Ted tried to hide. Leslie is ready to return to reclaim what is rightfully hers, and Nicole will certainly take advantage of this situation to prove that Ted cannot be trusted. Everything is no longer under control, and a small rift in the family can become a deep hole that swallows the entire empire that Ted is trying to protect. In another development, in a wooden house in the middle of the forest, where light only filters through the old windows and the heavy atmosphere prevails, the tension gradually reaches its peak as Allison sinks deeper and deeper into a world of her own imagination. Chelsea is bound in that space, not only physically but also mentally, forced to listen to every messy story, every piece of false memory that Allison imposes on her. Stories of a happy family, lavish weddings, non-existent memories are constantly repeated like a distorted, endless song, making Chelsea struggle to maintain a clear perception of reality. Every time Allison mentions their eternal love, her eyes flash with a light that is both naive and dangerous, as if Chelsea is no longer a separate person but just a character in Allison's psychological drama. On Monday's episode, that tension is shattered when Allison suddenly goes on a rampage, lunging at Chelsea with a kitchen knife that was used to cut her imaginary wedding cake. The shiny blade becomes a symbol of Allison's twisted mind, turning every false memory into a concrete act of violence. Chelsea struggles to keep her distance, but the frailty of her body compared to the power of Allison's psychotic outburst makes each passing second all the more terrifying. Viewers are drawn to the question of whether Chelsea can hold out long enough for the oncoming rescue team to rescue her, or whether her efforts are all in vain as the line between life and death becomes so thin that it almost disappears. On a deeper level, Allison's repeated words may be more than just a hallucination, but also hint at a dark past at Fairmont Crest, a place where psychotherapy and abandoned neuroscience experiments once existed. If Allison had undergone a failed form of therapy or had even been used for research purposes, the fantasies she told Chelsea could have been fragments of manipulated memories, stitched together into an alternate reality. Alternatively, it is possible that the lack of love in Allison's life had left a void that could never be filled, leading her to construct a fictional family to cover up her pain. It was the combination of emotional obsession and psychological disorder that turned her into a psychopath, both desperate for love and willing to destroy anything that stood in the way of her vision. The biggest question is whether Allison was truly insane or was faking it to cover up a colder agenda. If the attack on Chelsea was not an unconscious outburst but part of a bizarre ritual, then the knife was not just a weapon but an instrument in a twisted wedding, where Allison believed that the blood spilled would bind both their souls forever. In this case, her actions were not simply a fit of madness but part of a deliberate murder plan, turning Chelsea into an unwilling bride in a demonic marriage. The ambiguity between mental instability and cold intention makes it impossible for the audience to determine whether Allison is out of control or a dangerous manipulator using madness to hide her true nature. Another element that makes the incident suspicious is Chelsea's sense of time. In the cabin, the hours seem to stretch endlessly, day and night blending together to the point that Chelsea is no longer sure how long she has been there. It is possible that she is being slowly poisoned with some kind of chemical, causing her biological clock to be disrupted and her sense of reality to be distorted. If this hypothesis is correct, Allison is not only relying on psychology but also using biological tools to control the hostage, pushing Chelsea into a state of physical and mental exhaustion. This opens up the possibility that the kidnapping was not just a spontaneous act but a carefully calculated one, with Allison as a much more dangerous mastermind than what appears on the surface. In this chaotic situation, Chelsea is at risk of being both a victim and a perpetrator. If in desperation she tries to fight back and accidentally causes Allison a fatal wound, the public and the law may consider this an act of murder rather than self-defense. The thin line between self-defense and overstepping the bounds could make Chelsea the one being prosecuted, especially in the context that Allison may have prepared traces to distort the scene to her liking. This reversal of positions makes the audience worry not only for Chelsea's life but also for her future after escaping, because the risk of being tied up in a legal vortex is completely real. What's more, the story threatens to spread far beyond the cabin. If Chelsea is killed or seriously injured, Kat or Jacob could be held responsible because they knew where the place was but failed to report it to the police. That raises questions about indirect complicity, about the moral and legal responsibility of those around them for allowing an innocent person to fall into tragedy. In Dupree's world and its complex family connections, a small mistake could become the basis for a political or legal attack, and the incident could blow up into a scandal that affects more than one person. As the story unfolds, viewers are drawn deeper into a vortex of truth and lies, of reality and illusion, where the lines are so blurred that anything is possible. Allison could be the victim of a broken mind or the cold-blooded mastermind. Chelsea may be the unfortunate victim or the one forced to take responsibility for an unwanted death. Kat and Jacob may be unwilling witnesses or become scapegoats in a blame game. All of these scenarios intertwine, creating a haunting picture of human vulnerability to psychological darkness and the hidden pitfalls of complex relationships.